And welcome to Thete Gaming. I'm going to have a look at another one from the Dragonflight beta this time. Alpha has changed to beta, which means we can do all the proper leveling content. I was doing the leveling zone actually on a few classes last week. I'm not going to go to the Dragon Isles for this one for this afternoon because I want to get this one out today because I've been doing these on Fridays. And there's actually quite a lot of, I was doing this earlier on another character, there's quite a lot of to and fro to be able to get to the Dragon Isles. You even have to talk to a gnome at one point. It's a particularly annoying gnome. So I'm just going to talk about what I'm going to talk about from Stormwind here. It's going to be the new battle res that we have, new battle res that Paladins have, which was hinted at all week, but we do have it, as well as some changes with the talents, which by and large are positive. They're certainly better than they were. Well, I still have maybe one issue with it, but it could be just an error. Other people have a few other issues as well, which I'll go over. So first of all, if I can find my spell book, we have our battle res, which I'm going to put there for now. I'm just going to discuss this. So first of all, it's objectively a good thing. It's genuinely useful in Mythic Plus dungeons. It's always useful to have a battle res. You just have to make sure you're not the one who keeps dying. Otherwise, sod's law. You have one person with a battle res in a group and they're the one who dies. But it is useful for that. Now, I'll always come from the PvE point of view. If there are PvP issues, I don't know anything about them. I'm not interested in PvP in this game, only PvE. And although I don't do any difficult content these days, I haven't even played the game for a few years. I'm coming back to it, and I'm not coming back to do anything tricky. I've still got that, hat on of remembering what you would want for Mythic raiding, what you would want for Mythic Plus dungeons. Battle res, absolutely brilliant. Now, one minor issue, and this is purely a me issue, I am recognising this, is I did think to myself as soon as I got it, it was, oh, hang on a minute. On all the classes I play, well, at some level I play all the classes, whenever I've got a battle res, I always bind it to here to 7, which is also where I put my lay on hands. And I was actually moaning about it in the Paladin Discord, and someone said, come on. Lay on hands can only be used on a live person. Battle res can only be used on a dead person. Just macro it, and it's like, yeah, of course you can. In actual fact, what I'm hoping you can do on Clique, I won't be able to test it in the beta, but I can test it on live. Is as long as I can bind both things to the same keybind, I'm fine with it. It's absolutely not a problem for me. The only time I can see it going wrong is if I try and save someone a bit of a clutch save. But as they die, as I click it, it ends up battle resing them instead of doing a lay on hands, and I end up using a battle res on someone who maybe shouldn't have had it on them. But that is a me issue. In terms of something I think is a little bit more, it's still niggling as a criticism, but is still something I sort of feel. Lay on hands, it's never sat right with me that lay on hands be a talent, and I know in this new system a lot of core abilities have gone into the talents. Some of them have been core abilities since day one, but lay on hands isn't just a World of Warcraft Paladin core ability. It's the core of the core Paladin abilities. Whenever you have a game, and remember, Paladins in fantasy role-playing games massively predate World of Warcraft. Whenever you have a Paladin in a fantasy role-playing game, and it's called a Paladin, it's not just a Paladin style class, it's called a Paladin, there's always a heal like this, and frankly, it's almost always called a lay on hands. It's lay on hands in Dungeons and Dragons, which I'm not a historian of fantasy role-playing games, but surely that started the process. It's just the archetypal Paladin ability. If you say you're playing a Paladin class in any fantasy role-play, lay on hands is surely what you've got. So what I would say is, I think that should have been core anyway. I'd have been happier if it was replaced with, say, Word of Glory, if they just wanted to keep it down to a certain number in the spellbook. But now that we've got this extra one in the spellbook anyway, we've been given a +1 abilities anyway. And it is a niggling thing, but I would just swap it with that. I would just make lay on hands the default baseline and put that in there. And there is a practical reason as well. It's not just me going, oh, but Paladins have lay on hands. The other stuff's, optional. There is a practical reason as well, in that lay on hands is useful all the time. You don't always use it, it's an emergency use thing, but it is useful in every type of content. You're questing, you're soloing, or you're doing Torghast type stuff, or you're doing Mythic Plus dungeons, or you're just doing heroic dungeons, or you're doing whatever form of raiding or whatever form of PvP. Lay on hands is always useful. Battle res can only by definition be useful when you have someone in a group, when you're doing party content. So for that reason alone, I would say talent battle res, intercession as it's called, talent battle res, and put lay on hands on my spell bar permanently. Other things to note in terms of the type of battle, because there's different types of battle res, they're not all the same. And warlocks, for example, are going to have the battle res of choice for healers and casters, because the standard battle res, which is what this is, revives you with 60% of your health and 20% mana. But the warlocks in Dragonflight are going to have it return 60% mana. So healers and casters, if they fall into your battle res, they would prefer a warlock to res them first. So a little bit of coordination there. Let a warlock do it first. But for anyone else, this is fine. The other thing is, I did wonder if it'd be like the Death Knight, because the Death Knight battle res is an instant cast, but it does use a resource. It uses runic power. So arguably it comes at a bit of a DPS cost. But you get it is instant use. This one isn't. It has a cast time which is affected by haste, of course, but realistically it's going to mean it's less than a 2-second cast. Doesn't use resource. I'm fine with that. I prefer that. If it was to cost something like 3 holy power, it's like, well, yeah, you probably just prefer to cast it and not use the holy power. So that's absolutely fine as it is. I like the actual implementation of it there. In terms of usefulness, as I say, Mythic plus Dungeons, of course it's useful. Someone's saying, oh, should we bring the Ret Paladin or whatever? And it's like, well, they've got the battle rares, that could be useful. So yeah, that's good. It's really good for that. Raids, arguably less useful. You're likely to have enough battle reses. It's always useful to have more, because it's all right saying we've got so many battle reses and so many people with them, but if the people with the battle reses die, then yeah, it's not that useful. But it is not as useful in a raid. So ideally, you're still defaulting to wanting some sort of DPS buff for a raid situation, but I'm not sure we're going to get it. I think this may be it, but it's okay. It is definitely useful. In terms of the changes to the talent tree, now there's several things. First of all, there seems to be a general change, which I haven't looked at other classes yet. I was pottering on other classes last week, and I haven't looked since this update today. But I suspect this is something a philosophy they've extended to others as well. In that, it's now easier to get to the good talents without having to go through useless talents. I've said in the past, it's one thing if you have to go through a talent that you'd really rather not have. A lot of people will complain, that they can't just pick all the talents they want, but the point of a talent tree is you can't. But this time it's much easier to get it. Cleanse Toxins has been on a bit of a journey as the alpha has progressed and now into beta. The fact that it's beta as well, I'm also thinking I'm not sure we're going to see major changes now to this. This may be roughly how it goes live. They can tweak it. This may be roughly it now, so I would get used to that. So what you used to have, well, never mind what you used to have to do. As of late of last week, because I have talked about what you used to have to do. As of last week, what you had to do to get Cleanse Toxins, first of all, you had to get either Blessing of Freedom or Lay on Hands. Well, you still do. Then you had to get this, the Devotion Aura and Concentration Aura. Well, now you don't. Then you had to get Repentance and Blinding Light to get this. So now you've missed a step out. You do not need the Concentration Aura and Devotion Aura. You can just get Lay on. If you want a Blessing of Freedom and not Lay on Hands, then yes, you do. But, why? Even if you want Blessing of Freedom, you're still going to have Lay on Hands, surely. So now, Lay on Hands, straight to say Blinding Light, then Cleanse Toxins. And then you can have your armor and crit chance, crit improvement as well. And if you just really wanted this armor and crit chance, for example, really it's a crit chance you want, you don't have to go through this either now, because now what you can do is you can take Divine Steed. You're going to take Divine Steed because you need it to get down to here for Avenging Wrath. Give it the 2 charges. Now here's the thing, if I get rid of that, so I'd take that all the time. Now if I'm thinking for Mythic Plus, and this is like broad strokes here, but if I'm thinking Mythic Plus, I would think to myself, okay, Cleanse Toxins could be useful. Depends on the dungeon. Like if there's no diseases or poisons in that dungeon, of course you don't need Cleanse Toxins. Why waste it? But if it's one, it's like, okay, there are poisons and diseases, and do you know what? we shouldn't just ignore them. They can actually deal some damage. And either it's going to be like an AoE poison disease where the more people you have getting rid of them quite quickly, the better, or your healer doesn't have the ability to get rid of whatever it is, diseases or poisons, whatever it is you're facing. So you want to take Cleanse Toxins as a ret, let's say. Blinding Light can be useful in Mythic Plus dungeons. You know, even if it's just to just stop things for a second, just to interrupt a cast on something, or just to stop a load of ads, give you a second or two respite before someone breaks the CC on it, because it's only holy damage that doesn't break it, and then you're straight to that. You know, that's fairly efficient. And if it's not, you don't need cleanse, because it's a raid, and you don't need Cleanse Toxins in a raid, because in all likelihood, even on the few bosses where there will be poisons or diseases, the healers will probably have it covered. Well, the second charge on Cavalier is very useful. You could argue it's actually useful in Mythic Plus dungeons as well to keep up, but it's really useful in a raid, because if ever you have to move out from the boss, and there's, on most fights there's always some reason to have to move out from the boss, whether it be a random ability or a planned ability, you want to do it at the last possible moment. So a speed boost will help you do that, maintain DPS as long as possible. And having a second charge also means that when you can get back to the boss, you can rush straight back to the boss. So better that it be that way than to make you go through there, for example. The extra duration on Divine Steed, which would be useful in Mythic Plus dungeons if it weren't too many bloody talent points, is not as useful in a raid. A few seconds movement boost is all you need to get away from a boss, or to get to a part of the room you need to get to in most cases. And then once you've spent enough talent points, you've then got access to this crit anyway. So however you do it, whichever route, or both routes, you can still get to your crit. So it's more efficient. You're not having to waste as many talent points. Now, in terms of wasted talent points, I know some people are still not happy about this. We're still having to spend 2 on reducing the cooldown of Fist of Justice. I'm just trying to... The tooltip says exactly the same. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You need to do that to get down to... We don't want that. But down to here. And indeed down to anything useful. So if I sort of spend a few things here. So, again, you know, depending on what the fight is. Let's say you're preparing for a... I'm going to prepare for a Mythic Plus dungeon, actually. Because if I do for a raid fight, different fights. Some of them you might want to take Blessing of Freedom. Some of them you won't. You know, it could be argued there are some raid fights where you are wasting some of these talent points because you just don't need the stuff. You know, if it's just a tank and spank boss, then you don't need Blessing of Freedom. If there's nothing they're going to root or slow you, you don't need Blinding Light in a raid anyway. Repentance very rarely. Cleanse Toxins you probably don't need. You probably don't need that. But let's just say we're getting it for Mythic Plus done, so we'll spend that just to get us access to this row. So then Avenging Wrath. Of course you're going to have an Avenging Wrath. Now I'm going to discuss Avenging Wrath as one thing that could be an error, and I hope it is an error. I've just not seen a blue about it. I'm happy to assume it's an error. So what you used to have to do last week is after Avenging Wrath, the next talent down would be Blessing of Protection, which is now here. And then underneath it was a talent to reduce Avenging Wrath's cooldown, because the default was 3 minutes, so you had to spend another talent point to reduce it back down to the normal 2 minutes. So that's gone now. Not just the fact that you don't have to go through Blessing Protection, you've got other routes down to here. The talent has completely gone. And the reason for that is Avenging Wrath now has a baseline 2-minute cooldown. So it's saving you a talent point. Again, all of this is about saying, look, you don't have to spend talent points on a load of crap. I wish they'd apply the same thing to this Fist of Justice and Seasoned Warhorse. It's too many talent points for no real return. And as I say, from a raid point of view, I absolutely understand people not happy about this Fist of Justice thing. It's useless. But you've got alternative routes here, and and you don't have to spend an extra talent point to get it down to 2 minutes. Problem is, on the ret tree, if you get the Crusade talent, which, you know, it's quite normal, Crusade has a 3-minute cooldown. Now, what I'm hoping is here is that the Crusade, because the Crusade talent hasn't changed compared to last week, that they just haven't updated the spell data. because remember the default Avenging Wrath was 3 minutes. It was a talent that reduced it to 2 minutes. Because that talent is no longer there, it may just be that Crusade is still at 3 minutes when it's intended to be 2. If it's intended to be 3 and Avenging Wrath at 2, I'm not going to like that, because I was explaining to people, it's jarring to have, because it's basically the same cooldown. It's the same cooldown. It does slightly different things, but it's still your DPS cooldown. To have it, depending on how you talent it, sometimes on 2 minutes and sometimes on 3 is no good. And you may, it's not like a case of saying, well, you'd always take Crusade, would you? It's like, no, you wouldn't. On a 9-minute fight, you would not. Because in a 9-minute fight, you can get 3 uses out of Crusade. If it dies on the 9-minute mark, that's it. You're not getting your fourth. Crusade will just come off cooldown. That's actually the worst thing to happen. The boss fight ends just as a cooldown comes up. But on a 9-minute fight, you get 5 uses of Avenging Wrath on 2-minute cooldown. So, with the timing above a certain level, if you can get even 1 extra use out of a, say like a Avenging Wrath Might rather than a Crusade, that's what you'll do. So, but it probably, I don't want to go on about it because it's probably just an error. It's probably just a spell data error, and I'll calm down when it's fixed. In terms of other things, if I just mosey on over to here for the moment, we'll get down to the real highlight, which is the Divine Protection. Now, little discussion on defensives. Now, if I just go down here, let's say I was concerned, like, why do we want Divine Protection? Because it's a damage reduction. People say, oh, but you've got like bubble and stuff like that and lay on hands. It's like, yeah, they're a sort of emergency use. And if you try and plan to use them, you can't, because it's the damage that comes in a raid fight that can't be avoided. If the emergency use is for when you take damage that you should avoid. I mean, it could be that someone else inflicts on you, but usually it's your own fault. You should have avoided it and you didn't. So you need to press that to get yourself out of dodge. But in a fight, even if you're playing it well and you're not making these mistakes, you're ready to kill the boss, there's a certain amount of raid damage that's just going to keep happening. It's part of the fight. It's either part of the fight just to make your healers useful, or it's part of the fight to ruin melee DPS. We have to remember, Blizzard, any games designer has to introduce things to make it uncomfortable being near the boss. Otherwise, the whole raid would stack up near the boss, and it would be a much easier job for healers. All your AoE healing goes down there. Everyone stand here, DPS the boss. And so you have to design fights, by and large, to make people uncomfortable near the boss. And the way you do that very often is with ground effects that hurt, which means melee DPS will if they want to maintain DPS, they have to, sometimes by accident, but sometimes on purpose, stand in the puddles. Not stay there. I mean, unless it's like Heroic when you get away with it. Not stay there, but you have to move across them or skirt across them or something to maintain DPS. So you want damage reductions for either those moments or the regular bursts of damage. Now we've sort of got it. Now, a criticism of it is that it's now a 2-minute cooldown and 20%. People looking misty-eyed at shamans for all sorts of reasons. They get 2-minute cooldown for 40%. But I will say this. First of all, it's not really a 2-minute cooldown, because once you've taken... Actually, where is it? It's down here. In fact, if I go down there, I'm just going to take that. If I take that, all of a sudden, it's not showing there, but it will be. It's a 1 minute 24-second cooldown, because you get 30% off the cooldown. So it's actually a shorter cooldown. The other thing is, so you need it for different things. Let us imagine what you need it for is a regular pulse of spell damage that's going to happen, and it's going to weaken you to the point where you can't really afford to run across the puddles because you're going to be dodgy on health. 20% damage reduction should help you through that. It's certainly probably average. I mean, there are some specs that have something a bit better. There are some that don't have anything as good. I would say 20% damage reduction now on like a realistically 1 minute 24-second cooldown is probably reasonably average. That's not bad, in fact. Some get a similar damage reduction like with a much longer cooldown. But if you have this pulsing damage, it's going to happen, say, every minute, just for the sake of argument. You can now get around this as a paladin, as a ret paladin, because here's what you would do. And this is, bear in mind, you're not going to use your divine shield for an emergency use. You're now going to plan to use it. So the first one you can get rid of with divine shield. There's no problem at all. Absolutely ideal. It means you can carry on doing damage as much. You can stand as much crap as you like. You use the old divine shield, no problem at all. Then on the second burst, you use your divine protection for the purposes for which God intended, which is to reduce the damage, to allow you to survive it, and even take a little bit of damage from standing in the puddles to get to the boss. Then on the third one, you could take Blessing of Spell Warding, because that makes you immune to spell damage. Yes, that could also be used on someone else, and if it's going to be used as part of the fight strategy, we have to put it on a person, okay. But the chances of both these things happening in the same fight are not that, high. So if you don't need Blessing of Spell Warding as part of the fight strategy, you can use it for your own strategy, which is you use that on your third one. Your fourth one, Divine Protection's back up, you use Divine Protection again. And then you rinse and repeat, because by then your Divine Shields come back up, because again, talented with Healing Hands, it's got a 3.5 minute cooldown, but it doesn't matter if it's still on its baseline. 5 minute cooldown really doesn't matter, because it's still going to be up on the that fifth one, because it's 5 minutes later. So actually, maybe sixth one. Either way, as long as you've got it talented with Healing Hands, you'd still be fine. I'd forgotten actually where I was on that one. No, you would need it talented for Divine Shield to be usable again at that point. But what it does mean is if it's every minute, you can do something to at least reduce it, and half the time eliminate the damage altogether. So I think defensively, I don't think there's going to be much call to complain now defensively. And if there was an issue on the very small number of fights where it's physical damage, we still have got Eye for an Eye available. So yes, people will look at some classes and specs misty-eyed and go, oh, they've got a better damage reduction. But they don't have the other things as well. Or they'll look at, some others and go, oh, but there's a shorter cooldown, they can use it more often. Yeah. And things like rogues, rogues are always going to be pretty good at surviving. But again, I just look at us and I don't think we can complain now. I don't think we can complain. In terms of other things, we've got the changes that were sort of promised here. Ashes to Ashes down there, swap with Divine Toll, much more. That's a universally useful one. My own slight gripe, because I'm not that bothered about Fist of Justice. It's irritating, but as far as I'm concerned, my view is that you don't really get a choice with these things anyway. It's an illusion of choice, because you will take whatever is going to be best. In a particular encounter, you're thinking about whether it be Mythic plus dungeons, and it's a specific Mythic plus dungeon you're thinking about, or you're thinking about a specific raid boss. You can tailor these talents to that specific dungeon stroke raid boss, which is actually one of the big things I hate about this new talent revamp. Even though I can see the benefits in it, I hate it because it means at the top end you are going to be encouraged to have subtly different talent. You're going to be making quite a lot of these loadouts. But you can do that. You can absolutely do that. And what you'll do is you'll say to yourself, right, what are the utility things? What are the non-damage talents that I need to cope with this encounter or this content? And you'll pick those, because you have to pick those. And you will avoid any that aren't of any use. If you're going to do some content where you are 100% not going to be rooted or slow, you do not need Blessing of Freedom. If you're doing content that absolutely does not require you to get rid of any poisons or diseases, you won't take Cleanse Toxins. You will take the ones that you need to take, the ones that will be useful for that specific content, and then with whatever's left, you will get the best damage options. So my only gripe with this really is not so much looking at the odd other class and going, oh, I wish we had their stuff. It would be to note that ultimately, from a DPS point of view, any DPS, yes, particular encounters, there are subtly different talents that you might take with this new system. But ultimately, you've got two templates, AoE and single target. What is needed, even in a Mythic Plus dungeon? What's going to stop you getting that time met? Is it going to be the trash that can wipe you or just hold you up a long time? Or is it the boss where you need to burst it? It has phases and you need to burst it down really quickly. Otherwise you extend and you end up with another phase repeat or something like that, you know, or it could just wipe you. What is it? What do you need? Do you need the strong AoE? If so, you bring the strong AoE. Or do you need the real beefy single target burst, in which case that's what you bring. To that end, we've got a lot of talents on the left that are good for AoE. But we've got the odd one on the right that's good for AoE. And on the right hand side, you've got a lot of talents that are quite good for single target. And you've got the odd one that's good for AoE. I really wish, and I don't know whether they're philosophy, because I can imagine why they might do this. They've not said, so I'm only guessing. Maybe the reason is that there are some talents, of course, which are useful for both, and they weren't able to cluster them all around the center. So they've thought, okay, well, you know, if you want to take this, like the execution sentence with like a single target and an AoE, although I would have just moved that nearer the middle. But they may be thinking, okay, you may have to go down both sides for some content, so we'll just mix and match it a bit. But that's speculation. I don't think it's necessary. I would still prefer it if one side was largely AoE and the other side single target, and the ones that are useful for either or both, just group them in the middle. That would be a better design for my money. But that is my gripe there. In terms of the overall, though, what I would say is I've not seen anyone explain in what way this change is not better than the last one. I think it's objectively better than the one we had last week, which it sort of needed to be, because because now it's beta, I am thinking there's not necessarily a lot going to be done with the classes. Tuning, you know, given that it's beta now, it's like get people in, get people practicing, get people testing, and start tuning it. Which although again, I need to see what they've said, but I don't know that they've said this is it now. But you know, my experience tells me once you get into beta, that's probably about it. There may still be the odd change. Maybe they'll put intercession there. I was trying to think of the name of it again. The battle res intercession there instead of that, but that's a minor thing. I'm not gonna throw a wobbly if they don't. They might change that icon actually, because it's basically the same as divine protection there. Although that is a passive ability, so it doesn't matter that much, I suppose. But yeah, those are my thoughts. It is positive, excuse me. It is very positive, my views on this one. I think it's objectively better. I think the general design of being able to bypass useless talents, because that is a useless talent to a rep paladin that's not soloing. And even then, you know, yes, I don't think I would spend a talent point on it for solo purposes. But I would look at this and go, yeah, this is way better. And the battle res is very welcome. But those are my thoughts anyway. Let me know yours in the comments below. And until next time, I'll see you later.